The 1920s were loud. They were fast. It was a time after a big war. People wanted to forget a lot of things. They wanted to live. Life felt different then. Cities grew. New things came out. Cars, radios, movies. It was a time of big change. Things moved quickly. The economy for some was good. Money flowed. People had more free time, they had more chances to go out, and they went out to dance. This dance was a huge part of the 1920s. It was everywhere. It was in clubs, in halls, in speakeasies. People gathered, music played, and the music was new too. Jazz. Jazz was exciting. It was wild. It had a beat that made you want to move. It was different from the old music. It was faster. It was more energetic. This new music brought new dances, lots of them. The foxtrot was still around, the shimmy, the black bottom, but one dance stood out. It took over. That dance was the Charleston. The Charleston was a phenomenon. It wasn't just a dance. It was a feeling. It was a statement. It was freedom. The Charleston came from African American communities. It moved north, it hit New York, it exploded. Soon everyone was doing it. Young people loved it. They embraced it. It was rebellious. It was against the old ways. Parents sometimes hated it. They thought it was too wild, too scandalous, but that just made it more popular. You could spot the Charleston from across a room. It had specific steps: kicking out your legs, twisting your feet, flailing your arms. It was a high energy dance. You swung your arms. You tapped your feet. You did it solo. You did it with a partner. You did it in groups. People got really into it. They moved with all their might. It wasn't a slow dance. It wasn't a gentle sway. It was full on movement. Fast, hard, rhythmic. Imagine a room full of people, all doing the Charleston all at once. Their feet hitting the floor, their bodies twisting and turning. The rhythm was infectious. It pulled everyone in. Dance halls were packed. Clubs overflowed. People danced for hours. They sweated. They laughed. They let loose. This was their escape. Their fun. Their moment. The Charleston wasn't quiet, it wasn't calm, it was a full body workout. It was loud, it made the floor shake, it made the building vibrate, you could feel the energy in the air. You could feel it under your feet. This is the spirit of the Roaring Twenties. Bold, unapologetic, full of life, and this constant, vigorous movement on packed dance floors, it got people wondering. It made some people nervous, especially those looking at the old buildings that suddenly had hundreds of people jumping and twisting on their floors. The question started to form. A concern, a rumor. Could all this energy, all this dancing really be safe? Could something give way? The thought was there. A little whisper, a little worry. It was a powerful dance and a powerful time. So this idea started floating around, and this worry. Could all that intense dancing, especially the Charleston, actually make floors break? Could a whole room full of people just plunge down? It sounds dramatic. It sounds like something out of a movie. But people really talked about it. It became a kind of story, a rumor that spread. Think about how these things start. You have a new dance. It's wild. It's different. Older people already think it's too much. They think it's immoral. They worry about the young people. So, when something seems a bit out of control, like a dance that shakes the whole building, it's easy to latch onto a fear. It's easy to imagine the worst. Newspapers then were different too. They liked big stories. They liked headlines that grabbed you. A story about a dance craze leading to disaster. That's good copy. It sells papers, it gets people talking. Maybe a reporter heard a rumor. Maybe someone said, I felt the floor really shake last night. And from there, it could grow. A shaky floor turns into a weak floor. A weak floor turns into a collapsing floor. It's how stories get exaggerated. Also, think about the places people danced. Not every dance hall was new. A lot of places were old buildings. Warehouses turned into clubs, upper floors of buildings that weren't designed for hundreds of people jumping at the same time. These places might have already had issues. Weak beams, old wood. Maybe they weren't kept up very well. If a building did have structural problems and a big crowd was dancing energetically, then yes, that could put a strain on it. It's not hard to imagine. A lot of weight, a lot of rhythmic force. If the floor was already on its last legs, maybe the dancing was the final push. But was it the dance itself that was the cause of collapse, or was it just exposing an already dangerous situation? That's the real question. There were also some real incidents that might have fed the fear. Not always dance-related. Sometimes floors just gave out. Buildings collapsed for various reasons. Maybe a floor overloaded with goods, or a fire, or simply old age and decay. If one of these happened near a dance hall, or if it got reported at the same time the dance craze was at its peak, it could easily get mixed up. People might connect the dots in their minds, even if the dots weren't really connected. Oh, a floor collapsed downtown. Must be all that Charleston dancing. It's an easy leap to make. And there's the whole idea of resonance. This is a scientific concept. If you have a structure and you apply a rhythmic force at just the right frequency, it can make the structure vibrate more and more. Even small forces can build up, like pushing a swing. You push at the right time and it goes higher and higher. Could hundreds of people doing the Charleston in sync create that kind of resonance? Enough to really shake a building apart. People wondered about this. Engineers at the time certainly thought about it. The idea seemed plausible to some. It made the fear feel a bit more grounded, even if the actual collapses weren't widespread. So the rumor built. It fed on real anxieties. It fed on the perceived wildness of the dance. It fed on old buildings and sensational news. It was a good story. A scary story. And scary stories tend to stick. They become part of the background noise, part of the culture. The idea that dancing too hard could lead to disaster became a recognized thing. A cautionary tale, whether it was actually true or not. This set the stage for people to really look into it and to ask, did it actually happen? Were there real cases, or was it just talk? Okay, so the rumor was out there. People were worried, but did it actually happen? Did floors really collapse all over the place because of the Charleston? This is where we need to look at the facts, or what facts we can find. It's not always easy to find clear answers from 100 years ago. Things get lost, details get foggy. We need to check old records. What did the newspapers actually report? Not just the sensational headlines, but the actual news stories. Did police reports show multiple incidents of dance hall floors collapsing? Did fire departments get calls about this? What about building inspectors? Did they issue warnings or condemn buildings specifically because of dance-related stress? When you dig into the historical records, what you mostly find is a lack of widespread evidence. You don't see a long list of dance halls across the country falling down. You don't find consistent reports of mass injuries or deaths tied directly to floors giving way because of the Charleston. This is a big point. If it were happening regularly, it would have been huge news. It would have been documented. Now, that's not to say nothing ever happened. Buildings do collapse. Accidents happen. And sometimes, in old, poorly maintained buildings, a lot of people jumping at once could certainly contribute to a structural failure. Imagine a floor that's already weak. Maybe termites, maybe water damage, maybe just old age. Then you put hundreds of active, energetic dancers on it. The floor is carrying a heavy load. And it's not a static load. It's dynamic. People are moving. They're hitting the floor. That dynamic stress can be much harder on a structure than just a still weight. There are a few isolated incidents that are sometimes pointed to. For example, a gymnasium floor giving way during a dance, or a building having an issue during an event. But when you look closely at these, often the dance craze itself isn't the sole or even primary cause. It might be a contributing factor to an already existing problem. The building was likely already unsafe. The large crowd, combined with the energetic movement, simply highlighted the danger. Think about building codes. Even in the 1920s, there were building codes. People designed buildings to hold certain weights. But were these codes always followed? Was every building inspected properly? Probably not. Especially in crowded urban areas or for temporary venues, a building might have been designed for office space, not for hundreds of people doing a vigorous dance. An architect might not have imagined the kind of stress that Charleston would put on a floor. Engineers at the time were certainly aware of dynamic loads and resonance. They understood that sustained vibration could be an issue. But they also knew that modern structures, even in the 1920s, were generally quite robust. They were built with strong materials like steel, concrete, and heavy timbers. A well-constructed floor, even an old one, could usually handle a large crowd, unless it was seriously compromised. So, while the possibility was there, the widespread reality seems to be missing. It was more of a perceived threat than a common occurrence. The fear of collapse was real. The actual collapses, directly and widely caused by dance crazes, were not. It's an important distinction. The conversation about floors collapsing was much bigger than the actual instances of it happening. This means the story had a life of its own, separate from consistent proof. It means the rumor took root in culture, even if it didn't reflect a widespread structural crisis. It was a testament to the power of a story, more than the power of dance to bring down buildings. So, we've looked for the evidence, and what we find is that widespread floor collapses from dancing just didn't happen. Not in the way the rumor suggested, but the story still stuck around. It became something people believed, or at least talked about a lot. Why? This is where we get into urban legends and how people see things. Urban legends are fascinating. They are stories that get passed around. They often have a grain of truth or they touch on common fears. They change a little with each telling. The floor collapsing story fits this perfectly. It was a good story. It was dramatic. It was a bit scary. And it made sense to people, even if it wasn't strictly true. Think about the time. The 1920s were a period of huge change. New music, new dances, new ways of dressing, new freedoms for young people, especially women. This caused a lot of anxiety for older generations. They saw the Charleston as wild, immoral, even dangerous. It was a sign that society was going downhill. So the idea that such a dance could literally bring down a building, that fit their fears perfectly. It was like a physical manifestation of their worries about social decay. See, this wild dancing is so bad, it's literally destroying things. Also, dance halls themselves sometimes had a bad reputation. They were places where young people mingled, where rules were broken, where alcohol often illegally flowed. They weren't always seen as respectable places, so if something bad happened there, like a floor collapsing, it might have been seen by some as almost deserved. A kind of moral comeuppance for the perceived wildness and sin of the era. This kind of judgment can make a story more believable to certain groups of people. The media played a part too. As I mentioned before, a dramatic story sells papers. Even if there was only one small incident somewhere, or just a strong tremor felt, a newspaper could blow it up. They could write about the dangers of the Charleston. They could quote worried citizens or even engineers who cautioned about the risks. These articles, even if not reporting an actual collapse, could feed the general anxiety. They could make people think, if it hasn't happened yet, it's bound to. And once a story like this starts, it's hard to stop. People remember the exciting part. They remember the fear. They forget the lack of proof. They tell the story to their friends, their children. It becomes a piece of history that everyone knows. Even if that knowledge isn't entirely accurate. It's like other urban legends, like the idea of alligators in the sewers of New York, or phantom hitchhikers. These stories have a persistent quality because they tap into something. The story also showed the sheer energy of the Charleston itself. The fact that people could even imagine a dance being powerful enough to bring down a building says a lot about the dance. It was truly that vigorous. It was that impactful. It left an impression. So, in a way, the legend is a testament to the dance's power, even if the collapses didn't really happen. It underlined how revolutionary and energetic this new form of expression was. It was so intense, it felt like it could shake the foundations. Ultimately, the floor collapse rumor became a part of the Charleston story. It's often mentioned when people talk about the dance today. It's a way we remember the anxieties and the wildness of the 1920s. It shows how a powerful cultural shift can create powerful stories, even if those stories bend the truth quite a bit. It tells us more about human nature, fear, and storytelling than it does about structural engineering. So let's bring this all together. Did the wild dances of the 1920s, especially the Charleston, cause floors to collapse all over the place? The short answer is probably not in a widespread epidemic way. It's mostly a persistent urban legend. What we can say is this. The Charleston was an incredibly energetic dance. It involved a lot of jumping, kicking, and rhythmic movement. These dance halls were often packed, and some of those dance halls were in older buildings, perhaps not designed for such dynamic stress. So, the potential for a floor to be stressed was certainly there. There might have been a handful of isolated incidents. A weak floor, an old building, a huge energetic crowd. These things could combine to cause a problem. But these were likely rare. They were probably exceptions, not the rule. And often, if a collapse did happen, the dance was probably just the final straw for a structure that was already unsound, not the sole cause. It would be like blaming a slight breeze for knocking over a tree that was already rotting from the inside. The widespread story of floors regularly collapsing is more a reflection of the anxieties of the time. It shows how people reacted to rapid social change. The Charleston was new, it was exciting. It was also seen as wild, immoral, and perhaps even dangerous by some. The idea of floors literally collapsing tied into these fears. It became a powerful metaphor for society breaking down. The rumor also highlights the power of the media and word of mouth. A good, dramatic story can spread fast. It can become part of the collective memory, even without strong evidence. It's a classic example of an urban legend taking root and becoming part of how we remember a particular era. What this tells us about history is important. We need to be careful with stories that sound exciting or fit neatly into a narrative. Often, the reality is a bit more nuanced. The 1920s were indeed a wild time. The Charleston was a revolutionary dance. It changed culture. It was powerful. But its power was more in its impact on people, on music, on social norms, rather than its ability to bring down buildings. The legacy of the Charleston is immense. It defines an era. It represents freedom, rebellion, and joy. It's a dance that still captures attention today, and the story of the collapsing floors, while largely a myth, also adds to that legacy. It adds to the mystique. It makes the dance seem even more potent, more impactful, more capable of shaking things up, quite literally. So, when you hear about the Charleston and collapsing floors, remember the energy of the dance. Remember the spirit of the 1920s. Remember the fears of a society undergoing massive change. And remember that sometimes the most enduring stories are not always the most factual ones. They are the ones that speak to our deeper worries and our wild imaginations. The dance itself was truly groundbreaking, but it seems the ground beneath it, for the most part, held firm. It was the culture that truly shook, and that was a much more profound and lasting shift than any floor ever collapsing. The floors might have trembled, but they mostly stood. The people, however, were changed forever.